Imagine you're finally caught up with the Cosmere. It only took about 20 books, but dang it, you did it. You're excited to finally dive into the fandom and see what Easter eggs you may have missed out on, so you check out the wiki. Only, as you're reading through a few pages, you start to notice some things that you don't remember being in the books. Like, when was this character's favorite color revealed? This character's mother was never mentioned, so how do we know anything about her? Did you miss a book somewhere? Well, that always is a possibility, especially with how many there are and all of the novellas and secret projects. So go double check the bibliography. But if you have read everything, there is something else going on here. Extra canonical information. If you are new to Brandon Sanderson in general, or if you're just new to the fandom, or if you're not new and just want a refresher, allow me to welcome you to the world of Words of Brandon, more commonly known as WOBs or wobs. This video will be mostly spoiler-free, but there will be some discussion of general Cosmere world building. So, hello friends, I'm Sam. My credentials include being a Cosmere fan since 2016, going to more than my fair share of signings and events over the years, getting a fair few of my own Words of Brandon, and being a giant nerd who has been deeply entrenched in fandom culture since I was about 13. Cosmere is a really massive undertaking, and there's significantly more going on behind the scenes than we've been privy to in the books thus far. Brandon had always wanted to write a giant interconnected universe, but way back in the olden days, 2005, don't worry, I'm a 90s kid, that's not a dig at anyone, large-scale projects like the Cosmere were virtually untested, and publishers were kind of skittish, especially with a brand new author. This was an era before the MCU proved that audiences not only could keep up with a variety of interconnected stories, but that there was a significant market for them. And that was still a couple of years off. The first book that Brandon sold was Elantris in 2005, a standalone. Allegedly. Brandon couldn't out and out write it about this big shared universe, but he could include a mysterious beggar and hint at some greater things. Then when Mistborn came out around a year later, he could give an informant that same name and hint at things bigger than this one story. And then he could name drop that informant for a third time in Hero of Ages. And then again in Warbreaker. And then the fans start to catch on. All of this still has to stay in the background though. So the only real way to explain any of it and get real answers was through fan signings and Q&As, which the fans embraced wholeheartedly. Someone started keeping track. For a long time, they were actually all being recorded. A running list was kept by the more fanatical among us. The information was compiled, and it's now become a standard of the Cosmere fandom experience. So, what exactly are Words of Brandon? The long and short of it is that a word of Brandon is any answer that Brandon gives to any question. But let's break it down further. They mostly fall into at least one of the following categories. 1. Clarification on book material. These are answers about and clarification on specific things in the books. What was really going on here? This character that showed up over here is a world hopper, right? These are probably the most straightforward. Number 2. What ifs about the magic systems? Brandon likes to write hard magic systems, and they can get pretty complicated and expansive, and many of the features of each one just wouldn't always fit into the stories told in each individual book. There simply isn't time. Many of the facts about the magic are listed in the Ars Arcanum section of each book, which is good information and not just a glossary of things you already know, but the nitty-gritty details, how each magic would interact with each other, and the just-for-fun speculations don't generally get answered in the books. One of the more meme-worthy answers is if a shard blade could cut through a block of cheese. Number 3. Writing questions. These are the ones that are most like what other authors get asked. These are the questions about his writing process, about his inspirations, advice about the publishing industry, and his experiences writing and living in the world of fantasy authors. Number 4. Updates on projects. Brandon is a planner, and if you hadn't noticed, he has big goals. He'll share what he's working on in his weekly updates, and what he plans to work on in his yearly update. Given just how ambitious the cosmere is, spanning decades and likely 50 plus books by the end, fans will often ask about the status of planned novels, including long-awaited sequels and previously shelved projects. A more recent example includes the confirmation of the commitment to a long-talked-about cyberpunk trilogy for the Mistborn series. I'm particularly excited for that one. Number 5. Stuff that just won't ever get answered in the books. This is more trivia-type answers, stuff that won't fit into the plot. Characters' favorite colors, backstories on more minor characters, tiny world-building details, more information about stories and places we've already moved on from. This also includes questions about situations that probably won't ever happen, like what would happen if Lopin and Wayne met, or if Kaladin had become a surgeon. Number 6. Hints at future stories and spoilers. These probably constitute the largest portion of Words of Brandon outside of romantic questions. This is people trying to get a sneak peek at future books. Because even though Brandon is possibly the most consistent sci-fi fantasy writer, his books are still massive, and the waits in between them tend to drive us a little nutty. These are tidbits to keep us occupied during the waits, to help us stay on track with our theory crafting, and to keep us excited about the far-off future. An example of this would be Brandon name-dropping a new planet at DragonSteelCon last year. The final type of answer that could go with any question is the non-answer, or a read and find out. There are any number of reasons that Brandon might not give you an answer at all. These raffos are accompanied by a neat little card. It'll state RAFO on the front, and then the back reads, "Be proud. You have earned an official RAFO Read and Find Out card. You received this for asking the right question at the right time. It might mean the answer spoils too much. It might mean that the answer would make people focus on the wrong things. Or it might just be intended to keep you guessing. Regardless, it has been a pleasure to not answer you." So, are they canon? Kind of. Words of Brandon exist in a sort of third space of being canon until they aren't, or rather, Brandon won't outright lie, but he does reserve the right to change his mind in the future, especially for anything he hasn't fully hammered out yet. So they can be fully used for theory crafting, but just with the caveat that they aren't fully canon until they show up in a published book. I don't personally know of any Words of Brandon off the top of my head that have been fully contradicted, but it can happen. There have also been quite a few past Words of Brandon that have already made their way into published canon, and I would expect a lot more to do so. Now, it is perfectly fine to just read the books and not engage with Words of Brandon at all. They are never going to be essential for understanding what's going on in the stories right in front of you. Any essential information will also eventually make its way into the books. I've seen a fair bit of grumbling about them lately, since they are used somewhat frequently in the fandom, especially for theory crafting. And honestly, I understand that people feel left out. They feel overwhelmed with all of this extra information, and some people just don't care about anything not in the books, but Words of Brandon are firmly part of cosmere fandom. And just how much Brandon is not only willing to, but enjoys engaging with the fandom and talking endlessly about all the intricacies of his stories is something really special. And certainly not something you'll find in most fandoms. So it's okay to not personally enjoy them, but the griping is pretty unnecessary about something light and fun. So how do you find them? All recorded Words of Brandon are cataloged over on wob.coppermind.net, and many have been incorporated into the applicable pages on the Coppermind wiki. This is a really cool resource to see what has been asked, what stages of theorizing the fandom has gone through, and what still hasn't been answered. If you have gotten or ever do get Words of Brandon, please go submit them over on the Arcanum. It's a really cool thing and is entirely maintained by the fans. So, how do you get one? You just gotta talk to Brandon and ask him a question. And there are a couple of ways to do that. The most tried and true is to go see him at his book signing or convention. Now, this did used to be quite a bit easier but Mr. Record-breaking Kickstarter has gotten significantly more popular over the last few years. I remember the first signing I ever went to for Arcanum Unbounded, and there were only a few hundred people there. For these signings, it wasn't uncommon for people to loop back around in line for a chance to talk to Brandon some more. Some of the bigger signings would even go until the early hours of the morning, but Brandon would get to every single person. Now compare that to 2024, and how 7,500 badges for the Stormlight 5 release sold out in less than an hour. It's just not feasible to personally meet that many people in one weekend. Brandon also doesn't attend nearly as many events as he used to. Post-2020, he's really only been attending 1 or 2 conventions a year in addition to his own, and every signing is a ticketed event now with limited spots. Signing tickets at other conventions are either handed out at the Dragonsteel booth on a first-come, first-served basis, or distributed electronically prior to the convention. Signings at his own convention, Dragonsteel Nexus, are randomly drawn from all of the convention attendees, with about 300 spots for personalized signings and questions. Now, the second way to get your question answered is to ask it during a Q&A panel or live stream. The Q&A panels will happen at any convention he attends, and as for the live streams, Brandon has started doing these a little more regularly on his YouTube channel, mostly to make up for not getting out to as many conventions as he used to. The most consistent ones are his Halloween streams for big announcements like Kickstarters and secret projects, and Kola's Head Munching Day, aka Brandon's birthday, which is in December. This is a bit more of a wild card, sometimes being a random selection, a matter of who gets in line for the mic first, or relying on being noticed among thousands of other questions in a live chat. Chances for actually getting words of Brandon are decreasing, but we're also seeing more and more of the crazy cosmere information make it into the actual books. Stuff like the Shattering and Hoyd's backstory, or the natures of the shards, or different planets across the cosmere, are all making it into the books proper, which I think is really, really cool. There will always be a place for words of Brandon, though, as not quite every little detail can fit into a book. Honestly, we are pretty spoiled with just how much Brandon takes care of us. If you ever do get the chance, please ask about whatever you are most interested in. It doesn't have to be deep cosmere theories or romantics. Do you have a pet theory and you want to see if it's possible? Want to know more about your favorite character? The process for even drafting a universe this big? Ask away, and please tell us about it. You can find a lot of mine from over the years on the Arcanum, and I'll be sure to gather all of them for a future video. I even have some extra ones for you guys today that I got to ask Brandon about just last week at a signing. These will have Stormlight spoilers up through the end of Rhythm of War, and minor spoilers for Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Thank you all for watching, and please enjoy. I'll see you guys next time.
How you doing?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I am just fine.
Excellent. I have a couple of questions.
Yeah,
if that's
go for
all
it.
right. Perfect. Would Shaw not be able to corrupt a Deadeye friend?
Theoretically possible.
Theoretically? Would she be any more willing to help the new Odium than the last one?
What's
Shaw not. Would she be any more willing to help the new Odium?
yes. She not a whole lot more.
Yeah. But like kind of a little more. Would Teravangian be opposed to taking up any additional shards?
That speaks into how much he knows about all of this, which I don't want to get into. Is this one yours too?
Oh, no, that
was
one's
his.
not.
Okay, you're fine.
As of where Stormlight is in the timeline, has Virtuosity been splintered yet?
Oh, Rafa, you there? Okay. We're going to release that timeline pretty soon here. So.
Excellent. Okay, and then the last one. Was Honor capable of influencing or controlling the Radiance like Ruin is to anyone's spite?
No.
Okay.